First of all, just talk a little bit about the responsibilities that we have, some statutory responsibilities as an agency, some of the legal mandates that we have. All of our authorities come from Act 18 of 1995. That's when DCNR was created. It used to be DER, and the old fire laws go into the early 1900s. But they changed it and split DCNR and DEP, so that's why the act is from 95. And that's given us some of the legislation. This is what allows us to do and gives us all of our mandates to protect the Commonwealth from wildfire, and that's all lands within the Commonwealth, regardless of ownership. Prevent wildfires, extinguish them right away, and then talks a little bit about our warden organization. It gives some of the authorities that we have for our fire wardens out there, which actually do have quite a bit of authorities to go on private, any kind of land. If there's a fire burning, people cannot stop a fire warden from going onto the land to suppress the fire, regardless of who owns it. If the landowner is saying no, if there's a fire burning, we can go in there. And then some of the titles that we have here, Title 32 to enforce the wildfire laws, the cooperation with the different organizations that are out there, and then finally some of the prescribed fire that's in there about establishing the standards that I talked about yesterday and reviewing the burn plans. So part of the fire warden organization that we have, a lot of people do realize that have worked with us, but some of the people that aren't familiar with how we're situated is Pennsylvania is broken into 20 different forest districts, and within the forest districts we have a district fire warden, and that fire warden is responsible for all the wildfires within their regions there. And we have a chief fire warden, Mike Kern, who's not here today, but he's the overall warden, and then he goes down after him. It goes to the district fire wardens. He gives that authority, and then it goes down below the district fire wardens to local fire wardens. So I don't know how many fire wardens we have statewide right now. Does anybody from fire protection know that? Pfister? You don't know. Okay, yeah, there's quite a few local fire wardens that are out there, so it kind of breaks it down into the local level. But that's kind of how we're situated, and it's, as an agency, we do not have the manpower to put fires out by ourselves. So we rely a lot on volunteer organizations. The volunteer fire companies are key to our success when we're out there in our local fire warden organization. And in the past couple of years, we're starting to rely a lot more on some of the other agencies that are out there, which I'll cover in a little bit. But going back, if you look at the last 25 years, these are the fires that are reported. I realized this morning that I do not have 2025 on there. That goes only to 2024. But if you're looking in 2024, we had 1,460 fires. And this past year, we had 1,536 fires. So that line will be a little bit up here. If I'd have that other bar on there, it would be raised up. So if you're looking, through the years from going back to 2001 here, obviously you can see the amount of wildfires are going up. So it is busy for us. And when we have a busy season, you can see 23 was one of our busiest years that we had in the last 25. But this kind of just shows you where we're at here with wildfires as we're going through the years. Some of the recent changes that we had, we seem to have a busy couple years here. So since 2020, really 23 here, these are some of the larger wildfires that we've dealt with. Some of them we had to pull some of our incident management team on, others were just larger wildfires within the district. But we had over 8,300 fires since 2020, so we've been pretty busy. Looking at this here, the Crystal Lake fire, that was up in Luzerne County up towards Scranton. That was, I think, 4,300 acres, somewhere around there. That was one of our largest wildfires that we've had in recent years. Something to look at here when you go down, you look at the left. Anybody notice anything on the dates with these couple right in the middle here? Anybody notice anything weird? Fall fires. That's something, if you look back through the years, we really didn't have a whole lot of fall. We have a spring fire season, which is traditionally, that's always been busy for us. That's when we have aircraft in and everything. And then we have a fall fire season, which usually doesn't have a whole lot of fires. We're not super busy, but the last 2 years, you look at it, we've had some busy, and 2024 was very busy. Those are large wildfires that we had there in October and November. So things are changing. We are getting a lot more busier in times of the year where we're usually not so busy. So we do have a lot of fires that are starting to creep up in other times. And then the bottom two there, I'm going to be talking about the Thompson Hollow fire, the Packard and Thompson Hollow and Hammond Rocks. Those are the 2025. I'll be going over those here. So this is just kind of gives you a graph here of all of our wildfires that were reported last year. I think Brian Pfister in the back, he's the one that creates all these beautiful maps that we send out to everybody and all the intelligence that comes out. Comes from him and prints maps like these. But these are showing all the wildfires to kind of show you where they're at occurring in the state. You can obviously see some of our coal regions here that are very busy for wildfires. And looking at your map here, the only one county that we don't have a fire in this past year was Wayne County, all the way up there in the northeast. That's the only county that did not report a wildfire. So you can see they're spread out along the states, and you can obviously see some of the districts where we have a lot more of a busy fire program that's out there. And the larger the circle there, the bigger the fire was. And can you see the cursor up there when I'm moving it around? Oh, you can't see it up there. But I'm going to be talking about the fires down here, this one here. We talk about this one, and then up in Carbon County. These are the two locations of the bigger wildfires that we had this past year. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the Packerton fire. That's by Jim Thorpe, kind of, I want to say northeast. It's kind of up in the northeast, but just at the southern end of the northeast. It's Jim Thorpe is a very busy tourist town. So there's a lot of people that go into there, and we had a fire there that started. It would have been April 19th. That's the day before Easter. So we had a fire that started there. Right along the rail trail that we had. I'm going to show you some pictures here. Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead of myself. Let me back up for a second here. The causes of wildfires. Anybody off the top of their head, what's the biggest cause of wildfires in the state? Incendiary? Nope. Debris burning. Debris burning, we had 841 fires were debris burners. That was the leading cause. 99% of the fires that are in our state are human caused. So lightning does not start very many fires here. Usually when we have lightning, we have a lot of rain that's going to come with it that'll help knock that out. And so most of them are debris burning. Miscellaneous is going to be the second one. Power lines would be the third. Equipment was a big one last year, 128 fires. And incendiary was actually down a little bit lower with 76 fires. And lightning caused seven fires were caused by lightning. That's how low lightning is on the list. The only one that was lower is smoking. Smoking caused 6 fires. But equipment was a pretty big one this year, which I don't think we usually have equipment as that many fires that were started. For some reason, we had a lot of equipment fires this year. But again, you can see our big fire areas. Follow coal seam in the state, and you're probably going to have a lot of fires. That's just a kind of trend that goes on there. Okay, these are the pictures I was talking. This is the Packerton fire. This was from the first night that it started. Like I said, it was going to be the day before Easter, the night before Easter it started. These are just some of the photos that I pulled off of Facebook. And as you can see in one of them here, obviously what's our big problem that we're running into from that picture? Yeah, we have structures that are close by. You think people got a little nervous there when that was burning? So that's what they were dealing with the first night of the fire. Going into the second on Easter Sunday, this is some of the things we were dealing with. I took this video up on the eastern part of the fire where we were trying to hold. You can kind of see a blow line towards the bottom of that. But here's what the winds were doing. You think our blower line held? Yeah, not very well. Trying to get that to go again. But that's what we were dealing with there, the high winds like that on the second day, and you're in for a bad day when you get winds like that and you're on a wildfire. So that was kind of just to show you what they were dealing with out there on the line. This is one of our final map that we have. This fire early on, they realized that they were going to need more help. And I showed you that map with the 20 districts. Well, there's only so many people in that district that are going to be available to help on a wildfire. And then we're relying on our warden organization and the fire companies. But there comes a point where they need more help. They're going to need help from other districts. And if it gets to a point where it's just the complexity is getting so high, they're going to bump that up. And on the Packerton fire, we actually brought in our incident management team onto this fire. Like DCNR has 2 incident management teams, type 3 incident management teams. And does everybody know what an IMT is? Type 3 IMT? Some of you might not in the room. I'll explain a little bit about it, but it's It's basically a team that's coming in there. We're coming in when a team gets called, the district's a little bit overwhelmed. Excuse me. The district's overwhelmed, so what they're doing is they're going to bring an incident management team to try to take that fire away from them, that the IMT can run this fire and they'll be working on this, and the districts can go do all their other operations, because when this is burning, we still have initial attack fires as well that the district's worried about. So they'll bring in an incident management team and they'll be responsible for managing that whole incident there and kind of taking that off of the district. So with the incident management team we're bringing in, we have an incident commander, we have an operations section, a planning section, logistics section, finance section. So we have a lot of people coming in when we have a large incident like this, where we have a type 3 team come in, and they're basically just trying to take that load and that lift off the district so they can work on everything else that they normally have during the day and the other fires they're dealing with. But we did have a type 3 team that came in to manage this. They came in the third day of the fire to take that off. This is the final map of the fire. And I thought I could use my pointer, but it's not showing here. If you're looking around here, sorry for the guys on the sides that might not be able to see what I'm looking at. Some of the things we were concerned about with this fire here. The fire started, no, your pointer's not working. The fire started right down here. So it might be hard to see from the shading here, but this is a really steep slope right here. The railroad tracks run right here. We have a rail trail that runs right along there by Jim Thorpe. This is the town of Jim Thorpe, where the rail station is, for those of you that have been there. Yeah. So we have a rail trail that kind of runs down along here. We do have railroad tracks as well. So you have the town of Jim Thorpe. This is a real tourist area here. But then over here, we've got lots of structures. This is where the one picture was taken that I had there, where the structure was in that night. Yeah, so we have a lot of structures right here that are right up on the fire. We do have a bunch of structures down around here. You kind of see there's one there. We have a power line, the major power lines going this way, some of the concerns that we had on the fire. And there's really not a whole lot of places in here where there's access. So there was, the district realized they weren't going to be able to handle this by themselves with just the manpower that they had. So a lot of urban interface, a lot of recreation, and this town had a perfect view of this fire. There was all kinds, social media just blew up from it because they had a perfect view from the town right here of this fire burning. So you can see in here, these are this is one of the original hand lines that they tried to hold it on early on. That didn't well, it burned over. Here there's some lines. The video I took somewhere probably right around here. When our original lines, we had a heavy west wind and it was just pushing it over there and blew it out this way with all the winds we had. But this kind of shows you some of the lines here that we tried to hold it at. And we have another contingency line somewhere over in here that they were working on. But this is kind of what we're dealing with. And this fire ended up being 560 acres. So it was a large fire for Pennsylvania. When you're out west and you talk to the people and they're like, how big are your fires? Our fires don't get to hundreds of thousands of acres like they do out there. But this was a pretty complex fire with everything that was going on, and there was a lot of attention with it. We did have a U.S. senator U.S. rep was there. We had a bunch of politicians that came. So something that's happening now is our fires are getting a lot more political, where we're seeing a lot more of the legislators are interested in what's going on with our wildfires, where we really didn't see as much of that in years past. So that's one of the real things we're dealing with. And this year was really the case. We had a lot of political interest in all the big fires that we had. So we had to brief a couple times. A lot of people were coming in. A lot of dignitaries were coming in there that wanted to know what was going on and get a briefing so they could go talk to their people and kind of put them at ease.
I have a quick question about
Go ahead.
that. So that Act of 18 of 1995, with this happening and the political side, is there any talks about revising that and having the fire professionals going and revising some of that instead of just suppressing unless it's the wildland-urban interface?
Are you talking about like letting a fire burn?
Yeah, but I don't know, because 1995 it was then, and now we're in
Yeah,
2026.
the question was brought up if with all this and the political interest, are they looking at going back in and revisiting that act of 95? And I don't think so, because The reason that act, when they changed it, was just because we were splitting our agencies. It didn't really have a whole lot to do with the wildfire. They were just splitting DCNR and DER and DEP out of DER. So yeah, we're mandated to put fires out. We can't do the, hey, that's burning in a good area, let's let it burn. I know we've run into that in the past with the Game Commission where it was burning on your land and you're like, hey, that's gonna do good, let it burn. Unfortunately, the way the laws are written, we can't just stand there and be like, hey, we're gonna let it burn, because if it comes out of that and something burns, we're gonna be the ones that are held liable for that because we let it burn. So yeah, how our laws are written, we're required to suppress the fires, even though sometimes we know it might be a benefit for burning. Yeah, so this was a pretty good drain on resources when this fire was burning. We did have people, luckily, our fire season this year was kind of a little bit above average, but it wasn't, I wouldn't call it real bad. We had fires popping up, but we didn't have we didn't have our hands full all over the place. Fortunately, we had a fire burning, like this was burning. This was really the only big game in town. So we could pull people from all over the state, and we did drain our resources pretty good. We were pulling people from across the state to come in here to help us out. So it wasn't just a local area. We had people from all over the state. So as this thing was winding down, it was a good draw on our resources. This was winding down about April 24th, I think, is when we finally pretty much turned it back over and gave it back to the district. So April 24th, we were winding down. That was our trajectory, and we were going to turn it back over. So the night of April 23rd, they had a fire that started down in District 1, which is down just south of Shippensburg. They had a fire start. And some of the people actually within that were from District 1, they were just coming back from this fire here. So like I said, we only had one big fire going on. Well, now we have two big fires because this one's winding down and we got a new start. So the next video is going to show you, this is at 2 o'clock in the morning. This would be the night the fire started. I think the fire started around 1700. Am I about in that area, Eric? Yeah, it was around 1700 that fire started on the 23rd. They had a line around it, and then the winds kicked up late at night when they thought they had it, and the winds kicked up, and it blew it outside the lines. And what we're dealing with over there is very heavy fuels, and it's a snag patch. They had a lot of gypsy moth kill over the year, and it's just snags everywhere. And that's wildfires, and I'm sure a lot of you have learned with prescribed fire, one of the things that gives you problems when you're burning is the snags. That's one of your biggest issues as a burn boss. When I'm out there looking at a unit, I'm looking at the snags, not only inside the unit, outside the unit as well, because that's usually what bites us. It can be, my fire line's here, it can be outside that line, and you're gonna be burning, even if the fire's pulling in. For some reason, them punky oaks just love to catch fire and way up high, and we'll have there's a little ember that got somewhere high up in the crotch of that tree, and it's just dropping embers all over the place on the other side of the line. So the snags are the biggest issue that we deal with, and from a fire standpoint, then when they're burning and throwing embers everywhere, and also just a safety standpoint of snags out there and cutting snags. So where this fire started in District 1, it's a big snag patch. There's snags everywhere, and they have very volatile fuels over there. So it burns pretty well. This was early in the morning, a little bit later. Here's a video of it. You can kind of see look up in the trees there. You see all the snags that's all the fire just climbed, all them snags. I'll try to play that again. This shows it's kicked up, you're not going to win here. And they talked about your containment lines. You can have a nice dozer line around this. You think that's going to hold that with the winds kicking up and the way all those snags are burning? It's just all the embers up in those trees. And that was the biggest thing they were dealing with, was just the great number of snags that they had out there. Again, here's just another picture. And again, looking at all them snags up there, you just see how everything's burning. That's what gets us. If somebody asks what gets you on wildfires as well as even prescribed fires, it's the snags and our shrub fuels. That's the two things that make the hair on the back of my neck stand up when I'm looking at things. And they had both of those at this fire. So like I said, this one was just south of Shippensburg, this fire. It was very, very high visibility. that area is a very political area to begin with on anything with any kind of recreation and things. Everybody, if there's a problem, they run to the legislators in Harrisburg really quick. And it's really close to Harrisburg, so there's a lot of people that live in that area. Okay, this is the final fire with this map. This fire actually ended up at 2,248 acres. So this was definitely a big wildfire. You can see here on the map, and again, I'm sorry, I thought I could use my pointer on my screen here, but it didn't work. It works in my room, but then when I project it, it doesn't actually go. This fire started somewhere right around here. You can see some of the lines that were originally in there. We have some of the symbology on this map, some of our proposed lines that we were trying to catch it at. But so this fire was burning. Like I said, it started that night right as we were winding down on the other fire. When it burned through the night, the next day, early on, they realized they had their hands full. They had their hands full that they were going to need some help. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here, but day two, the first night it burned, and the next day, early in that, they were working on this. They had their hands full with this fire, and they got a call that they had a new start 10 miles to the northeast of this fire. So they were really involved with this. The district was really involved in this fire, and they had another fire start 10 miles to the northeast. So that's something as a fire manager you really don't want to hear when you got your hands full here, that you had another new start. And the way the weather was, as dry as it was, as windy it was, that's when they knew they had their hands full, and they pulled the trigger at that point. At that point to bring the team in. So we had a lot of people that were leaving one fire from the Poconos over there in Jim Thorpe, going right from there to this fire. So this would be, the second big fire, and this one, you could see it. I went there the second day, and you could see the column by Harrisburg. So when you see a column of smoke from Harrisburg from a fire, you think the governor and everyone's going to be interested in that. There was a lot of, I've never seen the press interest like this, and just the political interest that was in this fire. So close to Harrisburg, in a major fire in a highly recreated area there. So some of the things they were dealing with here, some of your issues, we have a power line that runs through here. You can see the power line. That was one of their issues that they had. Structures were a big thing. Right along here, there's a bunch of structures right in here. There's some structures down here. This was a Thompson Hollow fire, and this is Thompson Hollow Road comes through here somewhere. But there's a bunch of structures in there, and we have structures right out here. And then as you go over here, there's some as well. So there's a lot of things that they were looking at, trying to keep this within this box and not burn any structures. And the county was ordering a lot of resources. So we had a lot of volunteer fire companies. We had fire companies coming from all over the place at this. And we brought in people from all over the state. We brought in, I'm sure a lot of people here from other agencies were well. We had a lot of other partners that were in that helped us on this fire. Because again, we can't put out these fires by ourselves. We rely on a lot of other people. We just don't have the staffing for that. So I'll bounce over to the other fire here. This was the Hammond's Rocks fire. And this is one like I said, it was 10 miles to the northeast. Not a lot of structures around here, so that wasn't as big of a problem. Worried about the structures, but there isn't a whole lot around here. And so there was, where they're going to catch it and what's going to go on. The one big issue right away is right up here is Kings Gap Environmental Center. So that was a huge concern right off the bat with that. When they heard this start and where this is going, this can go right up to Kings Gap. That was just right up above it there. So that was the biggest issue that they were concerned about there was Kings Gap, that the park was there and wanted to make sure that didn't burn. So you have a major fire going on back here, that one, and then that new start happened. So we had our hands full. That was definitely the people that were there at that point were very busy because we were pulling people off of one fire and throwing them to another fire, and that's what made this one really bad. This fire in itself is a lot to handle, but then you take this fire and you add that other fire in, it is a very complex situation. So there was a lot of moving parts, and we had people coming in from all over. We had some people from other states. We activated our fire compact, and we had some people from some of the neighboring states come in there and help us out. So there's a lot of moving parts. So If you were ordered and you sat for a while, it took a while to get something, I apologize, but it's a big machine that's with a lot of moving parts, so sometimes things fall through the cracks. But that's kind of what we were dealing with there, is just there was a lot going on, and the visibility with these, very high visibility. This picture right here was from that fire, and it was very visible, like I said, from Interstate 80. We had a senator came. I don't know how many state reps we had there, and this actually had a visit from the governor. The governor's office wanted to know what was going on at these fires. They wanted updates like every couple hours. So this is as political as you're ever going to see on a fire. And the governor actually came the day, it was right after the fire we're getting ready to turn it back to the district. The governor actually came and toured the fire area. That's how high up the chain this thing went. So what it did is it's getting us very, we're in the eye right now with the fire, so anytime we have new fires that are starting, it's very political that they want to know what's going on in central office. So we have our wildfires, then we have our political fires. It can get very busy out there. Some of the lessons that we learned, ordering. An ordering process, we're still working on that, working through that. So people from other agencies as well, when we're ordering, we're going to try to get like, hey, if they're coming, we know we're going to have you for 2 days or 3 days, because it's kind of all over the board when people are coming, and it makes it tough in planning and operations and logistics, trying to figure out what we have there, because some people are coming, I can stay for a day, I can stay for 2 days, I can stay for 4 days. So we're trying to hammer that out a little bit. Middle management, we need more task force leaders out there in the fire. Our division supervisors were very, very busy and overwhelmed. So we need to get more task force leaders in that middle management level out there that can help take that lift off of the division supervisors. Communications, that's always a big thing. So still working on that. That's going to be an issue. 10 years from now, we'll be talking about communications as well, but it's something we got to get better at. ICP locations, we're learning that the command post doesn't have to be right where the fire is. For the big fire there, the ICP was pretty close to the fire, and you had to drive up real through the fire, basically, in the fire's edge to get to the ICP. Not good. We should have put it down closer to Shippensburg, where we actually had internet connection and you actually had cell coverage. So we're learning a little bit about that. First, move our ICP where it makes more sense. It doesn't have to be super, super close to the fire. And along with that, staging areas. We have to use more staging areas where we can just stage equipment that we don't need to jam up our incident command post, and put it close so we can get people out when we need to. Mechanized equipment was another big one. We had some feller bunchers in there. That's when you're looking at these snag patches, that's the best thing to get in, is get mechanized equipment in there so we don't have people in there with chainsaws that are going to kill themselves cutting the snag. And the mechanized equipment they can really make hay out there, and they can really take a lot of trees down, and they did a lot of work for us in a short amount of time. And the importance of check-in. We call you guys to a fire. When it gets to a larger fire, make sure you are checking in somewhere. If you don't check in, we don't know you're there. If we don't know you're there, you're not on the plan, we don't have food for you. We have to have check-in. We got to capture some better information at check-in. As far as moving down the road, some of our challenges, you see things are changing here in Pennsylvania. We're getting a lot of fall fires now, and some of our fires, we're getting a lot of fire weather where we're getting bigger fires. So things are changing. We have to keep that, and we have to try to adapt to that. Our volunteers are really going down. The volunteer fire companies, the numbers firefighters they're dwindling compared to what they were years ago. So we're trying to do our best that we can try to bring other people in, and we're working with a lot of organizations now and the agencies to try to help build up where we're losing that with a lot of our volunteers. Federal partners with it's more so funding with that in the slide there. Our funding's not as secure as what it used to be. We used to be getting a lot of money, and we were sure we were getting it, and things are changing in the federal realm now. We're not so sure sometimes of some of the funding that we're going to be getting to help us through some of the things. Future actions, capacity building. We're working internally. We're trying to pull state parks in with DCNR and the Bureau side now, forestry. We're trying to get parks more involved and get them on some wildfires so they can assist us when we get some of these wildfires. So we're looking at other ways, and also the Game Commission in the last probably 8 years. How much help we've got from you guys in the last couple of years is incredible compared to 10 years ago, 15 years ago. That would have been unheard of, but now we're we're getting a lot more help, and we need help when we get some of these bigger fires, and the more hands we can get in there that have an idea and learn know fire behavior, the better off we are. And then, like I said, finally with the collaborations, that's something we just got to work with everybody, because that's what we live and die by. And the prescribed fire, as it evolved in the state here, that's really turned into a blessing for us, because we've got a lot of people now that know a lot about fire, and it helps us out a great deal when we have fires now, where we can kind of lean on some of the people. And we've been doing that a lot here. We've been leaning on our federal partners, our other state partners, and even the counties and our local organizations. So with that, that's all I have. Are there any questions? Go ahead, Steve.
What caused those fires?
Steve asked what caused those fires. The Packerton fire in Jim Thorpe, that was arson. And can we say for the other one? I think we can. It's equipment use was the bigger one than the smaller one, the Hammond's Rocks. That was, I believe that was arson. It might have been incendiary, I think. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But the big one was equipment use is what started that one. Good.
Hey Todd, is there any negative fallout from the increase in wildfires as it relates to prescribed fires?
Okay. He asked, is there any negative fallout with wildfires as it relates to prescribed fires? I don't think so. I think people are starting to see the benefit of prescribed fire more now, because we're trying to sell that as, hey, if we're doing prescribed fire, we're doing some fuel reductions, but we haven't really seen any negative benefit. It's brought us to the forefront about, people are starting to talk about fire management now, where in the past they didn't. So it's just bringing us into limelight.
Just to follow up, any prescribed fires get out of control and create a wildfire?
Any prescribed fires get out of control and create a wildfire? Not last year. We have had in the past, yes. We've had a couple that got out of the box and burned. I know the Bureau, we've lost one. I know the Game Commission's lost one. It happens, because a lot of times we're burning on that edge. We end up burning more acres than we want. So sometimes it does happen. But as far as negative effects from fires that came out, prescribed fires that got out of control, we haven't really had any negative effects from that.
We've got a question right here.
Go ahead.
I was on the Thompson Hall in the Hammond. In the Hammond, when I was on that, I noticed that fire ran into a prescribed fire area. Any comments on how that helped or hindered?
Yeah, I did not mention that. The second fire, the smaller one, where I said Kings Gap was up to the north there, that was actually a prescribed, they did have that set up for a prescribed fire. That wasn't burned though, Eric, right? That was a unit you guys had set up.
We burned 25 acres kind of right on the edge.
Okay, yeah, they burned 25 acres on the edge, and we did try to hold it at the prescribed fire line. It did not hold there though. But it did, so that the prep did actually help a little bit, but it actually, up there by the park had a prescribed burn there and had a couple units there. Anything else? All right. Thank you.